I also have to thank Organic Sulfur for Health. Nice website for those of you that can take MSM. I have to admit today, before I continue on with the bankers, that I do have an official Liar Liar Pants on Fire award today. Before I move on, the Lake Andres Military Operations Area is that they have no idea what could possibly be making the loud booms that are heard at night. Perhaps a little known military flight area might be the cause of said weird noises. Some Mitchell area residents were in a state of bewilderment last Saturday night after hearing said loud boom. And though the definitive information is scant, the boom could have been from a jet, I guess, flying at supersonic speeds. The boom was heard around 11 p.m., spawned calls, of course, to law enforcement officials in Mitchell and Mount Vernon, who could not determine the cause for the noise. The National Weather Service office in Sioux Falls reported rain and not much else. Perhaps a little thunder. A lightning strike would be heard as a boom, and that's what they're going with. There was a little bit of clouds, tiny bit of rain, and sudden thunder that sounded like a sonic boom of a plane. That's their story. And of course, Lake Andrews Military Operations Area said, we don't know what it is. So, officially, Lake Andrews Military Operations Area, you are big, fat, cuckahead liars. Yes, you are. And that's all I have to say about that. There is a lot of info today. It's on the page. Look through. The news, well, is bad. That's all I can say. News is bad. Everybody's fighting. Why are they fighting? Because bankers have convinced us that there's a good guy, there's a bad guy, and we get to pick sides, and if we kill for them, everything will be better. So we will continue with that. I have decided to ignore the news in favor of, just ignoring it. Oh, before I move on, apparently scientists officially say that men feel far more stressed than women because we relate to panic differently. Estrogen apparently makes us less panicky. Well, if you've ever heard me lose it, and for the new people, you may not have heard that thing, but I will panic whenever I freaking feel like it. Shut the hell up, doctors. Okay, moving on. We are at free silver, crown of thorns, cross of gold. 1891. The money changers prepared to take America economy down again. The method and motive was laid out in shocking clarity, actually, in a memo sent out to the American Banking Association members. This memo called for bankers to create a depression on a certain date 3 years in the future. Now, according to the congressional report, now this one was dated April 29th, 1913. On September 1st, 1894, we will not renew our loans under any consideration. On September 1st, we will demand our money. We will foreclose and become mortgagees in possession. We take 2/3 of all the farms west of the Mississippi and thousands of them east of the Mississippi as well, at our own price. The farmers will become tenants, as in England. These depressions could be controlled because America was on the gold standard, which I talked about yesterday. Now, because gold is scarce and it becomes one of the easiest commodities to manipulate all through history. And if you want to hear the story of that, go through the last 2 days of shows. Anyway, by 1896, the insurance of more silver money had become the main issue during the presidential campaign. Williams Jennings Bryan, a senator from Nebraska, ran for the presidency on free silver issue. At the Democratic Convention in Chicago, Bryan made an emotional speech which won him the nomination, and a nomination entitled Crown of Thorns and Cross of Gold. Only 36 years old at the time, the speech was widely regarded as one of the most important speeches ever made at a political convention. At the end of the speech, Bryan said, "We will answer for their demand for a gold standard by saying to them, you shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." Powerful speech, actually. Bankers lavishly supported another candidate, of course, William McKinley, who favored the gold standard, as it always goes. The resulting contest was one of the most fiercely contested presidential races, actually, even up till now, of American political history. Bryan made over 600 speeches in 27 states. McKinley campaign got manufacturers and industrialists to inform their employers to believe that if Bryan were elected, that all factories and plants would close and there would be no work. The bankers' ploy worked. McKinley beat Bryan by a tiny, tiny margin. Bryan ran for president again in 1900 and then again in 1908, falling short each time. Now, during the 1912 Democratic Convention, Bryan was a powerful figure who would help Woodrow Wilson win the nomination. When Wilson became president, he appointed Bryan as Secretary of State, and Bryan soon became disenchanted with the whole Wilson administration. He served only 2 years in that administration before resigning, 1915, over the highly suspicious sinking of the Lusitania, which was the event to drive America into World War I. Although William Jennings Bryan never gained the presidency, his efforts at least delayed the money changers for 17 years from obtaining their next goal, a new privately owned Central Bank of America, although, as we have talked about before, they already had one. Now, next step, J.P. Morgan and the crash, 1907. During the early 1900s, men like J.P. Morgan, of course, hold on guys, sorry, real glitchy computer today, it's crazy. Anyway, men like J.P. Morgan led the charge to reinstate a privately held central bank. The final panic here would focus the America's attention on the supposed need for a newly chartered central bank. The rationale was that only a central bank could prevent bank failures. Morgan was by far the most powerful banker in America and the suspected agent for the Rothschilds. Morgan had helped finance John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil empire and helped finance monopolies of Edward Harriman in railroads and Andrew Carnegie in steel and numerous other industries. J.P. Morgan's father, Julius Morgan had been America's financial agent to guess who? The British. After his father's death, J.P. Morgan took on a British partner, Edward C. Grenfell, a longtime director of the Bank of England. In fact, on his death, Morgan's estate contained only a few $1,000,000. The bulk of securities that everyone thought he had owned were in fact owned completely by foreign interests. He was not rich, but he lived it. So, 1902, we've got Teddy Roosevelt allegedly went after Morgan and the conspirators to break their industry monopolies using Sherman Antitrust Act. Reality, Roosevelt did little or nothing to interfere with this monopoly, again, of bankers and their surrogates. An example, Roosevelt supposedly broke up Standard Oil monopoly, but it actually was not broken up at all. It was merely divided up into 7 different corporations, all still owned by the Rockefellers. The public was made aware of this by a political cartoonist like Thomas Nast, who referred to the bankers as the money trust. So, in 1891, British Labour leader made the following statement on the subject of the Rothschilds. This blood-sucking crew has been the cause of untold mischief and misery in Europe during the present century and has piled up its prodigious wealth chiefly through fomenting wars between states which ought to have never quarreled to begin with. Whenever there is trouble in Europe, wherever rumors of war circulate and men's minds are distraught with fear of change and calamity, you may be sure that a hook-nosed Rothschild is at his games somewhere near the region of the disturbance. Comments like this worried the Rothschilds, I guess. And toward the ends of the 1800s, they actually purchased Reuters news agencies so they could exercise control over all of the media printing. Yeah, they own that. And if you want to know how they started that, listen to yesterday's show. Now, by 1907, after Teddy Roosevelt's re-election, Morgan pushed for a central bank. Yet again, using combined financial muscle, Morgan and his friends were secretly able to crash the market. Thousands of small banks were vastly overextended. Some had reserves less than 1%, thanks to principle of fractional reserves. Within days, bank runs were common across the whole nation. Now, Morgan stepped in, the public arena anyway, promised to prop up faltering American economy by supporting the failing banks with money he manufactured out of thin air. Outrageous proposal, far worse than even the fractional reserve banking. But Congress let him do it. Morgan printed $200 million in completely worthless private money, bought things with it, paid for services with it, sent some of it to his branch banks to lend out at interest. His plan worked, and soon the public regained their confidence in money, quit hoarding the currency. However, as a result, the banking power was further consolidated into the hands of a very few, very large banks. By 1908, the panic was over. Morgan was hailed as a hero by the president of Princeton University, a man by the name of Woodrow Wilson. All this trouble could have been averted if we appointed a committee of 6 or 7 publicly spirited men like J.P. Morgan to handle the affairs of our country. Just got the chills. Now, economic textbooks later claimed